He's like, happy Sunday. Bye. Bye.
What are you going to do today?
I turn into He-Man.
You're going to turn him He-Man. Alright. Apparently they didn't want to talk today. So, today we're starting a new study on men of the Bible. And it's called Unsung Heroes. And it is, some of the men may be well known. Some of them are lesser known. And I'll be honest, I started reading this and studying for it, and I really, really liked this book. I really did. It makes me want to study more. So now I have to figure out what I'm going to do. Next week we're supposed to go on to man number 2, but I kind of want to dive into the guy that we're talking about today a little bit more. So I don't know which direction I'm going to go. I don't know if I'm going to spend 2 weeks on this one, or if we're just going to do the summary of the chapters and then move on, and then you all can study for yourself. I really don't know what direction I'm going to go. But today we're talking about Ishmael, and it's about living in a dysfunctional family. And I thought, well, you know, and in some aspect, if we look at everybody around us in the world and our family, there is, at least there has been a time that we have been dysfunctional. There is something that's going to happen. It's just going to happen. It's life. We live in a dysfunctional family. Now, the thing about today is we're not supposed to stay in the dysfunctional family. And I'll explain that more later. But that is the idea that we're starting with, is when we think of Ishmael, I want to think of living in a dysfunctional family. And all this is in Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 16, chapter 17, chapter 29, specifically verses 9 through 21. Chapter 25, specifically 7 through 18, and 28, verse 9. We're going to look at all of those throughout this study. But we're going to do a little, I guess, history, background. Ishmael had a difficult childhood. So going back to the beginning, like who made Ishmael? Abram and Sarai wanted a child, but guess what? It wasn't happening. We all know that story. They wanted a child so bad, but it just wasn't happening. God wasn't blessing them with a child. So Paula's words, real short, I won't say synopsis, that's not the word, explanation. Abram slept with his concubine. Now, he had total permission. We know Sarai gave Hagar permission to do this. We know that Abram's wife was Sarai, but we know back then it was not unusual for them to have concubines. It was very normal. It was not unusual for them to use the concubines for a child if you could not bear one, especially if you were not bearing a son. So Sarai was not only not bearing a son, she was not bearing a child at all. So they wanted a child, a son, so desperately that she gave Hagar permission to sleep with Abram. And lo and behold, she got pregnant. And lo and behold, it was a boy. And we'll find out later on, an angel told her to call him Ishmael. But think about this. You're with your husband. You're trying so hard to have a child. You've got this, in today's world, mistress, I guess, whatever, living girlfriend, whatever, with you. You've got this concubine with you. You have to find it in yourself to give your husband permission to sleep with this child, knowing that the whole point of doing this is to get a son. But deep inside of yourself, deep inside of Sarah, I'm going to call her Sarah, deep inside of Sarah, you're really not wanting her to, because yes, it's Abram's son, but it's not your son. You're not able to give him that. Just think about that. You're in that situation. Hagar comes up. She says she's pregnant. That's going to change the whole relationship that you had between Hagar and yourself. You can just see, I can see the jealousy. I can see the tension. I can see the hatred that is happening here. Chapter 16, verse 4 in Genesis tells us, Hagar became very proud and began to feel she was better than Sarai. So in turn, Sarai ran Hagar away into the desert. So we're going to stop right there. Now, was Hagar knew? She probably knew that Sarah had been wanting a child, that she couldn't have a child. I mean, obviously she lived there. They're in the same household. She knew Sarah wasn't pregnant. Sarah was up in age. She wasn't going to have children. But so was Hagar right when she found out she was pregnant to go rub it in, to turn, to think that she's better than Sarai? She might think that, but should have she shown it? And that's hard. She's human. But again, the relationship strained. Well, here's a person we're forgetting about. Who else is in this trio? We've got Abram. Now, Abram's caught between a rock and a hard place. He's got his wife, Sarah, that he loves, that he wanted a child with, but he's got this concubine, Hagar, that did get pregnant, that is bearing him a son, and now the two women are probably making his life miserable. We can see it. We can see this story unfolding. So Sarah gets mad. Sarai gets mad. She sends Hagar to the desert, says, get out. I don't want you here. Get out. Now, when she does this, she's taking away everything from Hagar. No food, no clothing, no husband to take care of her, no job, no nothing. She's literally out in the wilderness on her own. She went to the desert. While she's in the desert, an angel told Hagar, go back. As hard as it is, go back. Now, I say it's hard, but Hagar is a woman. She's alone in the desert. She has no male around. She's pregnant. And she may have been wanting to go back. Now, did her attitude change? No. But she probably was wanting to go back. She wanted the shelter. She wanted the food. She wanted the clothes. She wanted security. So she went back. The angel also told her, you're going to have a boy. And you're going to name him Ishmael. And that but then I thought this description was, I guess I never really paid attention. I don't say ironic, but neat. I guess he's going to be a wild donkey of a man, untamed and free. Now, when I was pregnant with Austin, if someone would have came up to me and said, look, you're going to have a boy. You're going to name him Austin, but he is going to be all boy. He's going to be wild. You're not going to be able to settle him down. You're not going to be able to control him. I'd probably personally start regretting, worrying. Okay, what have I done? Why did I want this child? Why did I do this? So this has got to be going through Hagar's mind. And Hagar may not fully understand what's going on. But she knows that she's having a boy. So she knows the lineage now is going to be passed down through her. So she thinks. She thinks now, okay, I've got one up on Abram. But wait a minute. He's going to be wild. He's going to be untamed. He's going to be free. So this is where we're at. So she heads back. She gets back home to Sarah and Isaac and that clan. Well, lo and behold, about when Ishmael's 13 years old, and this is all estimated, but we seem to think around when he was 13 years old, Sarai became pregnant. You know, the one who was never supposed to be pregnant, the one who was way past childbearing age, was never going to have a kid. She gets pregnant. Can you see the jealousy? Can you see the tension coming back? Well, wait a minute. You know, Hagar, I'm supposed to be number one. I'm the one who's supposed to have kids. I'm the one who bore the son. What are you doing? How did you get pregnant? So if any of the tension had settled down when Hagar came back, it's definitely back full force. Probably 100 times worse. But poor old Ishmael did nothing wrong. He didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask to come into this turmoil. He did not ask for the life that he was given. But his life as he knew it was about ready to change. When Sarah weaned Isaac, which we know in those times you weaned him around 3 or 4 years old, they threw a party. Abram threw a party for Isaac, for Sarah, for weaning him. Well, think about it. That puts Ishmael, if Ishmael was 13 when Isaac was born, that puts him about 15, 16 years old. Now think about it. What teenager is going to want to be at a 3 or 4 year old's party? Not very many of them are going to be there by choice if they had a choice. They're there because you're making them be there. It's mandatory. It's family. Now, this is his little brother. He may have wanted to be there, but you got to think about it. For those of us around teenagers, for those of us that have been at these functions before, what do teenagers do? If they don't want to be there, if they're bored, if it's not something for them, what are they going to do? They're going to goof off. They may be mocking Isaac. He may be playing around, not taking things seriously. He might be messing things up. Just goofing around, poking fun, making fun of Isaac, just playing around, laughing. You know, he's being a typical teenager. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing. But guess what? Sarah gets mad. What mother wouldn't? You're trying to throw this party for your child. You're at the, we're going to say birthday party for in today's terms. You're having this party for your child. Everybody else, well, I shouldn't say everybody else. There's somebody over there goofing around. It's somebody in your family. You get upset because they're ruining what? Your child's birthday. They're taking the focus off of your child. Sarah gets mad. Sarah gets mad. What does Sarah do this time? Get out. Get out. But this time it's a little bit different. Who does Hagar have to take with her? She's got to take her son. So the first time they got sent to the desert, she was just by herself, which was bad enough. The second time she was sent to the desert, she now has this teenage boy that she has to care for, that she has to look after, that has to go with her. But in those times, by that time, you were the man of the house. My words, man of the house. You were to take care. So now Ishmael had to grow up in a matter of minutes. He could no longer be a teenager. He had to take care of his mother. He was now the sole provider for her. If they wanted food, he had to get it. He's the one who had to have a job. Again, what are you going to do? You're out in the middle of the desert. You're out in the middle of the desert. So everything, this child's life has changed. Now, think about this for a minute. Okay? We've got Abram, who just lost a son, right? His wife just sent him to the desert. We got Isaac, who's losing a brother. He has no clue what's going on because he's only 3 or 4 years old. But he knows his brother is leaving. He doesn't know if he's ever coming back, but he's leaving. We've got Hagar, who is losing everything again. Life as she knows it, it's gone. The only one who is happy in this whole scenario is Sarah. Because Sarah gets what she wants. Now the focus is on her son and her son only. Ishmael was in the middle, and it wasn't by choice. But we are told that God was with Ishmael. A little bit more about him. What did Ishmael do? What kind of person was he? Genesis 21, verses 20 to 21 tells us that Ishmael was an archer, and he took a wife from Egypt. So he ended up marrying. It goes on to tell us in Genesis 25, verses 13 through 15, that they had 12 sons. So Hagar is no longer by herself. She's got grandkids galore. She's got a daughter-in-law and her son. We keep going in Genesis. Genesis 28, 8 through 9 tells us that Ishmael even had a daughter. And this daughter married Esau. So again, Hagar is being well taken care of. Ishmael is being well taken care of, even though his life that was chosen for him was not by his choice. Genesis 25, 7 through 10 tells us that Ishmael came back for Abraham's funeral. Now think about that. Think about that. And this really stuck out to me because he left, he didn't leave. He was thrown out with his mother when he was about 16, 17 years old, 15, 16, 17. He's never been back. He's never seen his dad. But he knew when Abraham died. Genesis 25, 17 that was before. Never mind. 25, 7 through 10 tells us that Ishmael came back for Abraham's funeral. So what does that tell us? That Ishmael and Isaac had to stay in touch. They stayed connected somehow. Now, they may have not been that far away. I think desert is like thousands of miles away. It probably wasn't. It's a little bit more than what you would call our next door neighbor's house, but it probably wasn't several hundred miles away. So probably close enough that the town gossip or you still knew what was going on with each other. And who knows, Isaac and Ishmael, somehow they stayed connected. Somehow. And we know in Genesis 25, 17, Ishmael dies at the age of 137. So he has a long life, a fulfilled life. He ends up married. He ends up having 12 sons. He has a daughter. He takes care of Hagar. That's a given, I think. We aren't told, but it tells me that he did. So, living in a dysfunctional family, that's pretty dysfunctional, right? Your mama hates your aunt. Your daddy is stuck in the middle because he had a kid with somebody else. There's all this hatred, tension, argument going on in the house. You're the reason for it, even though you didn't do anything wrong. Another son comes, your brother comes along, and that just adds to the problems. And then you end up getting kicked out for something you didn't even have any control over. So, dysfunctional family. That describes it, the dysfunctional family. But there are 3 quick things that we can learn from Ishmael. Number 1, life is not fair. Life is not fair. It wasn't Ishmael's fault that he was born to Hagar, and it wasn't his fault that he was born because Sarah could not have children of her own at that time. It wasn't fair that they got kicked out of their home over what? Jealousy. None of that was fair. None of it. But Ishmael had a choice to make. He could either dwell on that, or he could go on and live his life and be a person of God, which is what he did. He chose right. We all have stories about life not being fair. We do. And in the example in the book, there was 3 examples. And one of them was, you're the best wife. You do everything you can for your husband, but yet he still decides to go and cheat. He still decides to get a divorce. He still decides to look elsewhere for his entertainment or whatever you want to call it. You've done nothing wrong, but yet your world is falling apart. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. You've been at a job for 30 years. It's a promotion you've been waiting for. You needed it. You're qualified for it. You want it. And it goes to the person below you. The person who you were supposed to have the chance of getting it before they even were considered. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. You buy a new car, or you go and you fix your car, and you're supposed to be ready to go and be on the road, and you get 10 miles down the road and the car breaks down. Or you have a car wreck, or your car is totaled, or your car is stolen. Do you have any control over that? No. Life just isn't fair. But there's other examples in the Bible about life not being fair. Let's think about Joseph. When he turned down Potiphar's wife and turned her away because he wouldn't sleep with her, he wouldn't do what she wanted, what was his punishment? He got thrown into prison. Was that fair? No, that's not fair. What about Balaam's donkey? This donkey kept Balaam from being killed. But what was his reward? Being beaten 3 times. Was that fair? It's not fair. What about Stephen? He was stoned to death for believing or having faith in Christ. Was that fair? No. So what are we saying? Life is not fair. We have to accept that. We have to just go on and say, okay, some things in life are going to happen and they're just not fair. The second thing that we learn from Ishmael is we must not let a difficult childhood keep us from living a life pleasing to God. And this one hit home to me because how many people have told me, well, it's the way I was raised is how I turned out this way. It's because my mom and dad cheated, so it was just in me to cheat. My mom and dad and grandma and grandpa are alcoholics, so I had no choice but to be an alcoholic. My mom and dad and my brother and sister were all into drugs, so I had no choice but to get into drugs and follow that path. My dad slept around on my mom, and he was my example, so I had no choice but to sleep around my wife and stay unfaithful. You all get where I'm going. That's the difficult childhood. We have a choice to make. We have a choice to make. Ishmael was kicked out about the age of 16, which we have said. Sarah and his mother Hagar did not get along, and like we talked about, we can only imagine what that life was like. It was not an easy childhood for Ishmael. It was not. I can imagine the birthdays, the celebrations, Sarah over there being moody, not wanting to contribute, not wanting to give Ishmael praise, not wanting to accept the situation at all. But Ishmael grew up in that. And just like we said a few minutes ago, he had a choice to make. Yes, our childhood, our experiences affect our attitudes, our behavior, our beliefs as adults. But they don't control them. They don't control them. If our parents are alcoholics and we see what it does to them and we see that it's destroying them, we don't have to go down that road. We don't. We are our own person. We make our own decisions. Ishmael was his own person. His life was not fair. He did not choose his childhood, but what did he do? He chose to get married. He chose to be faithful. He chose to treat his kids right. Is that what he grew up in? Absolutely not. He grew up in a house of hatred, of jealousy, of tension, of people not liking each other and back and forth bickering each other all the time. He chose a different life. We have to realize that the way things are when we grew up, or the way things we know are wrong, that we have to put it behind us. Put it behind us and move forward and choose not to be that person. The third thing we have to do, you have to play the hand you're dealt. Okay? You're given cards, you gotta play them. You may not pick them, but you've got them. What are you going to do with it now? It is up to us to decide whether we are going to let the hardships of life overcome us, or whether we will be faithful Christians in spite of all the adversaries that life throws at us. With God on our side, there is nothing life can throw at us that we cannot overcome. Are they going to be easy? No. Are they going to be hard? Yes. Are there going to be times we want to quit? Yes. Are there going to be times we want to give up? Yes. But we can get through them. It's the hand we're dealt. The best lesson we can learn from Ishmael is to accept our lot in life and deal with it in the best way possible. And this is, when I thought about this, you're given, you're dealt cards, you have to deal with them. I think of, for me, it was losing my mom at 18. My life was just beginning. College had just started. Now, I could have let that ruin me, or I could learn from it. Was it hard? Absolutely. But it prepared me in ways I didn't realize when we lost my dad, when we lost a sister-in-law, when we lost, back then I had no idea I was going to be a preacher's wife, but it prepared me for ways for all these funerals that we have to attend, of things to do, of things to say, of how to act. It prepared us. That's the card I was dealt. At 18, I was, and I know some of us have lost our parents back when we were 2, 3 years old. Some of us may have never known our parents. But to me, I was dealt that card. What was I going to do with it? I could have let my life spiral out of control. I could have just given up. I could have ran away from home. I was 18. I didn't have to stay at home. But I did. I used death as an example because that's a big card we're dealt. What about we get a sickness, and the big thing going on is cancer. That's always going to be around. Our loved one has cancer. How are we going to handle it? How are we going to handle that card being dealt to us? How are we going to handle that child who is born with a disease or born with something, I don't want to say wrong with them, but something out of balance? How are we going to handle that? Are we still going to love that child? Are we still going to raise that child and love that child like it's our own? Or are we going to be ashamed to take that child out somewhere? Are we going to be ashamed to tell others that, yes, we had this kid? I've heard in my life, and I've never said it, but I have heard in my life, this is the child I'm ashamed of. This is the child I wish I never had. And just think of that child when they hear those words. The one you wish you never had. That's the card you were dealt with. And how are you playing it? Are you playing it the Christian way, or are you playing it the pity party way? We just got to be careful. And I use that because those are the ones that are prevalent in my life. The ones that I have went through, the ones that I have dealt with personally. But you can think of any card. Like I said, at work, you're treated wrongly, or you're, whatever. It even happens in church. It happens everywhere. It's life. But what's the very first point? Life is not fair. We're never promised it's fair. But in point 3, we are promised God is with us. God is always there. And there's nothing that life can throw out to us that we cannot overcome if we are a child of God, if we do what God says do, if we are living the Christian life that we need to live. So those are the things we learn from Ishmael. Next week, I think we talk about her, and I think that's how you say it, H-U-R. But again, I don't know if I'm going to dive more into Ishmael. There may not be that much more to know about him, but I don't know if I'm going to go that direction or if I'm going to move on to chapter 2. But I will see you all here next week. I hope everyone has a great week. For those that are on fall break, enjoy your couple of days off. For those of us who still have to go to work every day, just make the best of it and have a great week. And I will see you here next week.